Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, June 13th, and this week, Uber invents the bus, a new Chicago ordinance, and Waymo is expensive. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. I didn't even realize it.
Yep.
It felt spooky and I didn't know why, but here we are.
I mean, the stories are certainly spooky, and it's I'm in Pennsylvania right now. Nice weather, but how's Chicago weather? What's happening out there? Is it finally
It's a little
nice?
gloomy. It's gloomy, but I think we're gonna have okay weather for Father's Day weekend, which is nice, and people will be out and about. I'm going to the Cubs game on Sunday, so hoping for nice weather there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, excellent. We're going to jump into these stories, which are, as always, pretty interesting. And there actually may be some updates that I don't even know about on one of the stories, but we'll focus on what we do know as of now. But we'll begin with the first story here, which is a doozy as always. Uber has invented the bus, and this is from Gizmodo. And they reported, quote, the ride-hailing company recently announced Rideshare, in which shuttles will travel dozens of fixed routes with fixed stops, picking up passengers and dropping them off at fixed times. Amid the inevitable jokes about Silicon Valley once again discovering buses are serious questions about what this will mean for a struggling transit system, air quality, and congestion. Kevin Shane, who studies this sort of thing at the Union of Concerned Scientists, once said everybody will say that Silicon Valley reinvented the bus again, but really it's more like they're reinventing a worse bus. Meanwhile, the federal government is cutting support for public services, including transit systems, many of which still haven't fully recovered from the COVID area budget crunches. The ridership nationwide is up 85% of pre-pandemic levels. So it's easy to see why companies like Uber see a business opportunity in this space. This is, I think, a larger issue than even what's happening with Uber. We really see a lot of these things where privatization comes in and tries to break and replace the public sector, and I just don't always think that's the right move. And in this case, this article is flashing a lot of warning signs.
Yeah, I agree that I don't think the bus needs innovation at this point. Like if there was a better bus, if maybe electric buses, which I've seen out, Silicon Valley and tech companies can come in and reinvent things that way. But I don't think we need a private company to come in and replace the bus route. We've seen what Uber did when it displaced taxis. It broke the system and then replaced it in the way that it saw best fit. And with the bus, like I don't know that Uber stepping in, replacing, I'm thinking in Chicago, the CTA, that's going to be the best option. What's going to happen to areas that really rely on the bus? And is Uber going to be serving all areas of the city in a fair and equitable manner? Or is it going to wipe out the CTA and replace the bus system in the image that it's going to make the most money? I don't trust companies to step in and do what's best for the community, particularly when it comes to things like public transportation that so many people rely on. And that really, is the bus system perfect? No, it's not. But at least it's equitable. At least it provides service to areas who are, typically underrepresented when it comes to big business stepping in and protecting their interests. So I don't like this. I think Uber should stay in its lane, for lack of a better word. Rideshare is great. Rideshare serves a ton of purposes, but stay out of public transportation.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. You're going to have an issue now where, again, it's no longer about the public interest. It's about how much money does it make. And if they start taking things over, like you said, you'll see areas where they say, well, we're just not going to serve there. Or, oh, who's to say they're not going to say there's now surge times on buses? Where all of a
Right.
sudden that $2 or $3 ride is now a $5 or $6 ride. That doesn't seem like a big deal, but that is a game changer in the worst way for people who are used to public transportation. We understand that, and you bring this up a lot on the show. Uber started out as a selective kind of black car service, and that was okay. It's it was designed that if you had the money and resources, you could get an Uber. You're now they're now trickling into saying, well, you're going to have no other options except be forced to fork over whatever amount of money we want, and we will determine if it's worth our time to have a bus or location there.
Right.
That's just scary stuff to me, and I don't know how other people feel about this, but I can't imagine they're too thrilled.
Yeah, I don't like it. I think this is a prime example of where the government should step in and set regulations and make sure that it is protecting its citizens in a way that it didn't do when Uber first came into cities and displaced taxis. The cities allowed Uber to just steamroll into cities, make it so that taxis really had no way of defending themselves. Uber broke the system and then recreated it in a way that worked is the best way possible for Uber, not necessarily for the cities that it was servicing. Here we are today. It's too late to go back and change that process, but this is an opportunity for local municipalities to defend themselves and set regulations about public transportation, about where buses can be used, about permitting, about equity. There's all sorts of ways that they can make sure that if this is going to happen, if Uber is really going to put these buses on the street, that it's done in the right way that works best for the community and not for Silicon Valley.
Yeah, 100%. Could not agree more. Which and actually gives us a good transition into our next story about the government stepping in cities. And this is in the hometown Chicago here. A new Chicago ordinance is up for debate. Now, this is from Chicago Tribune. They reported, quote, Rodriguez's ordinance would raise driver pay during rides to $1.50 per mile and 62.5 cents per minute in July of 2026. It would also establish a $7 minimum driver payout for each trip. The City Council's Workforce Development Committee, chaired by Rodriguez, is set to discuss and vote on the measure Thursday. So this happened yesterday. If it passes, it could face a final vote from all aldermen next week. In addition to pay raise, the ordinance would require fare breakdown to be shared with both riders and drivers. It would also add driver safety measures, like requiring passengers to identities to be verified, and would reconfigure the driver process when drivers get deactivated, offering a 7-day notice ahead of suspensions and then details explaining why they have been deactivated. Shocking no one, Uber and Lyft blasted the potential pay hike Monday. Lyft said the ordinance would force thousands of drivers out of the app hours at a time. So this is, and Brian, I don't know if you know the update on this. I haven't had a chance to look today. I know this vote was yesterday. This has been brewing for a while. We know some of the local driver organizations are working on this. This is big. Again, if you have any insight onto where it's at now, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I haven't seen how the vote came down, but I can tell you that we are heading in the right direction here with governments looking at how to make driving for Uber and Lyft and working for rideshare companies beneficial to the workers. For so long, the companies have been able to make these rules, change their policies, change pay rates, not give any notice about deactivations, create an unlivable environment for their workers and just force people into essentially poverty. For the longest time, drivers have not had any real ability to protect themselves, their interests, their pay. So I love seeing that cities are trying to help the citizens that they serve. Whether this is the bill that passes or it's another one, that gets amended at some point, we'll see. But I like that this is on our radar. We've been talking, over and over with partners that we have throughout cities around the country, including Independent Drivers Guild here in Chicago, about ways in which cities can step in and create ordinances that protect the worker. Here we are. So I think this is a great first step. I love the initiatives that are in place. I will leave it to the drivers to decide what are the right numbers, what's the right pay, what's the right hourly rate, how much notice do we need for deactivation. That's policy that we don't need to put our thumb on the scale on, but these are issues that need to be addressed and protections that drivers need. So I'm really encouraged to see that it's gotten this far in Chicago, and we hope to see that it gets over the finish line.
Yeah, and it's interesting too as I reading through this. Even as rideshare has evolved in cities and cities have learned to deal with it and manage it, even the even the drivers who have been fighting since the beginning for kind of better living wages and pay, even their demands have evolved and gotten more sophisticated as to what they're asking for, what they need. And in looking through this, just on surface level, this isn't insane demands. This is, even seeing something as simple as, hey, making sure riders are verified. I can't see why that's an issue, especially since we talk all the time about Uber and Lyft are, potentially piloting the fact that you, as a rider, you need to have verification, which shouldn't be a pilot. It should just be what it is. And then the things such as deactivations, where you get a warning and then 7 days, and then they have to explain. This it's not. These drivers aren't coming with an ordinance and saying we want to get $20, $35 an hour, full-time employees with health benefits. It really is saying, here, let's find a middle ground on this. This makes sense. Again, of course, Uber and Lyft, the first thing they say is, if you do this, we're gonna freeze out drivers. I mean, it's basically what they're saying. It sounds like they're gonna do the same playbook they did in New York if this passes.
Right. Yeah, Uber hates change because their status quo has worked really well for them. They've been able to underpay drivers for a long time. They have not had to be transparent for a long time. Deactivation has been the Wild West. So why would they want more regulation when things have been going so well without it? I understand their position, but the truth of the matter is we have to be treating drivers, we have to be treating customers, we have to be treating our communities with respect. And the way the system is set up, drivers are underpaid. There's no transparency in terms of deactivations. There's little transparency in terms of how the payments are structured, and how even what customers are being charged. Like, Uber has so much information out there. All that these bills are asking for is fairness, transparency, making sure that people can put food on the table when they work hard and do a service that creates billions of dollars of opportunity for the company. So I don't think they're asking for too much. I think that these are basic rights that every person who goes out and works hard every day should have. So I like the direction that we're heading, and I hope that something gets done to ensure that there's just fairness and transparency all around.
Yeah, likewise. And I apologies here because I don't know the updates as to what happened Thursday. I'm sure they're out. I'm sure we'll talk about it next week and get more details on that, because again, it will go to other aldermen. So we will see. Very exciting to see what happens. And our final story today: Waymos are expensive. They actually cost more than Uber and Lyft. And guess what? Riders are okay with it. And this is from TechCrunch. Reported that, quote, Obi, an app that aggregates real-time pricing and pickup times across multiple ride-hailing services, have just published what is calling the first in-depth examination of Waymo's pricing strategy. The company found Waymo's self-driving car rides to be consistently more expensive than comparatively offerings from Uber and Lyft. And guess what? It doesn't seem to matter. The report, shared exclusively at TechCrunch, is based on a month's worth of data collected between March and April in San Fran, California. Obi pulled nearly 90,000 offer records from Waymo, Lyft's standard offering, and UberX in order to compare prices. Then compared ride requests from the same times and routes. It found that Lyft offered the lowest average price at $14. Uber was next at $15. Waymo's average price across the month's worth of data, $20.43. The company found that 70% of users who had taken a Waymo said they prefer a driverless car to a traditional rideshare or taxi. Now, besides the enthusiasm, though, Obi did find that safety is still a big concern for riders. Of those surveyed, 74% said safety is their biggest concern, and 70% of respondents said they think there should be some form of remote human monitoring of the rides. So, every time we say this every time, and I truly mean this, but every time that we get more stories or more articles, more research on Waymos, it just really starts shining a bigger light as to what's happening, where it's at, and what's next. And it next is here.
Yeah, agreed. I think this is telling us that people are excited for self-driving cars. They're excited for the prospect of not having the driver. They, certainly they, as they state in the article, safety is a big focus, but I think that they might feel safer without the driver in the car, without the human interaction, without the thought of assault, like you've talked about. So I think what we're seeing is people are willing to pay more for that luxury. Obviously, there's the other side of the coin where they talk about that they'd like to have human monitoring outside the vehicle. That's interesting. But we are seeing that self-driving cars are here. We are seeing that people are willing to pay more for them. And as the technology improves, those prices are only going to drop. So what I think Uber and Lyft and other rideshare companies need to be focusing in on here is these prices are only going to get lower. Eventually, they are going to be lower than Uber and Lyft, and that's got to be really worrisome to those rideshare companies, because if Waymo is taking up this percentage of the market share while being new and more expensive, imagine what's going to happen when the technology improves and the prices get lower.
Yeah, that to me is really the craziest thing. Like you just said, we all, yes, we knew it's coming and people are using them, but this isn't a dollar or two difference here. This is, and a week ago we talked about how Waymo has officially surpassed them, Lyft in San Francisco as far as rides, I believe. But this is the first time we're getting 90,000 offer requests, so it's a lot of data behind this. And Waymos aren't like a dollar or two cheaper. They're exactly $6 more for a comparable ride from a company, Lyft, which has literally been around for 10 years. So a company that's around for less than a year with a ride that's $6 more is blowing, like you say, is blowing away Lyft. And right, so what happens when it's $14 or less because there's no drivers? So yeah, this is really telling, but it is interesting even with all of this. Yeah, the thing that definitely stuck out for me is that 70% of people are looking for some sort of remote human monitoring. That's interesting. I didn't know that, the safety wasn't a shock to me. We all have been discussing it for years, but the idea that they actually would like a human monitoring and making sure they're okay, it kind of shows that as much as they're dipping their toes in, there is still that at least hesitation in their mind whether they buy whether they get the ride or not.
Right? It's kind of wanting the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
They want to be alone in the car, but they still want the human, monitoring. They still want the human to be maybe making some of the final decisions. Obviously, the human can't control every aspect of the ride. There's going to be events that occur during a ride that any amount of human monitoring would not be able to control. But I understand if something goes wrong, if you're driving around in circles and the car won't stop and you can't get out of it, as we've seen stories reported on, you want some sort of human monitoring where there's an alert saying, hey, there's an issue with this car. Maybe push the stop button
All right.
or get it to have it pull over. But these are issues that are going to be resolved. I think as people get more comfortable with the technology and as the technology gets better, there's going to be fewer demands for that human touch. And as the more we can remove humans from these rides, the cheaper they're going to be. I would be very concerned if I was Lyft and seeing this story with these
Yeah.
numbers. Maybe this is just a shiny new toy that people are gonna, it's gonna wear off, and maybe we're seeing the height of it right now, and Lyft actually has some life over the next couple of years. But I would be very concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. And we will also see how these numbers start looking when it starts getting away from the tech sectors and the states that are early adopters. That's really going to tell you that when we start seeing that first city, and I think it might be like Wisconsin or Michigan, when we start or somewhere in the South that's not Austin, when we see that data, and if it's still pointing to this, that's game over for them unless they can find a way somehow to either collaborate, which I know they're trying to, or somehow circumvent them. But I don't see it happening at that point.
Yeah. As we say, time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell, as we like to say. But that is the stories for this week. And of course, Brian, I will give you the final say before we head into the weekend.
Yeah, we just always remind everybody that if you find yourself injured in an accident while in an Uber, Lyft, or any other gig-related activity, give us a call. Visit us on our website, legalrideshare.com. Consultations with our attorneys are always free. We can help you with your insurance claim, put money in your pocket for things like medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, any other damage. Please give us a call. Time is of the essence. The cases do not get better with time. And we're always standing by, ready to help.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. And as I like to say, that is the end of this week in Rideshare. See you next week.